and the thing which he did displeased the Lord, wherefore he slew him also. Then said Judah to Tamar's daughter-in-law, Remain a widow at thy father's house till Shelah my son be grown. For he said, lest peradventure he die also, as his brethren did. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. In the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died, and Judah was comforted and went up unto his sheep shearers to Timnath, he and his friend Hira the Adulamite. And it was told Tamar, saying, Behold, thy father-in-law goeth up to Timnath to shear the sheep. And she put her widow's garments off from her, and covered her with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place, which is by the way to Timnath. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given unto him to wife. When Judah saw her, he thought her to be an harlot, because she had covered her face. And he turned unto her by the way, and said, Go to, I pray thee, let me come in unto thee. For he knew not that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, What wilt thou give me, that thou mayest come in unto me? And he said, I will send thee a kid from the flock. And she said, Wilt thou give me a pledge till thou send it? And he said, What pledge shall I give thee? And she said, Thy signet, and thy bracelets, and thy staff that is in thine hand. And he gave it her, and came in unto her, and she conceived by him. And she arose and went away, and laid by her veil from her, and put on the garments of her widowhood. And Judah sent the kid by the hand of his friend the Adulamite to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he found her not. Then he asked the men of that place, saying, Where is the harlot that was openly by the wayside? And they said, There was no harlot in this place. And he returned to Judah and said, I cannot find her. And also the men of the place said that there was no harlot in this place. And Judah said, Let her take it to her, lest we be shamed. Behold, I sent this kid, and thou hast not found her. And it came to pass about 3 months after that it was told Judah, saying, Tamar thy daughter-in-law hath played the harlot, and also, behold, she is with child by whoredom. And Judah said, Bring her forth, and let her be burnt. When she was brought forth, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, By the man whose these are, am I with child? And she said, Discern, I pray thee, whose are these, the signet and bracelets and staff? And Judah acknowledged them, and said, She hath been more righteous than I, because that I gave her not to Shelah my son. And he knew her again no more. And it came to pass in the time of her travail, that behold, twins were in her womb. And it came to pass when she travailed, that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took and bound upon his hand a scarlet thread, saying, This came out first. And it came to pass as he drew back his hand, that behold, his brother came out, and she said, How hast thou broken forth? This breach be upon thee. Therefore his name was called Pharez. And afterward came out his brother, that had the scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name was called Zerah. We find here the life of Judah, and we find some of the things that Judah did, some of the things that he was involved in. And we can see from this story that Judah did not understand certain parameters for morality and things of that nature. But I do believe as we look through this passage, there are some things that we could certainly glean from it. I believe that God gives us the account of Judah for a purpose. I believe that we are to look at the negative traits of the people in the Bible as much as we are to look at the positive traits of the people in the Bible. As I said last week, we do not find a record of anything negative about Joseph, for example, or Daniel. They were men that God did not choose to record any negative traits. That's not to say that they had no negative traits, but it's just to say that the Lord did not see fit to record those things. But we do see some others where those negative things are recorded for us so that we will know here's what we are to do and here's what we are not to do. So there's sins of commission, there's sins of omission. And commission is when you do something you're not supposed to do. And omission is when we don't do what we ought to do. And sometimes that even can be the worst thing. But nonetheless, when we learn about Judah, we see that Judah went to the people of the land of Canaan and began to have relationships with them. And we see some things that come out of that. And so I'm going to break this up in a few points, and they're all going to start with the letter F. And hopefully that will help a little bit with our study today. Number one, we see Judah's friendship with the Canaanites. Judah's friendship with the Canaanites. We see that the Bible tells us here that Judah went down from his brethren, and he found a certain man, this Adullamite, whose name was Hira, and he became friends with this man. And we see through that Judah became friends with the Canaanites. And so he began to mingle with them. And we know that Esau did the same thing, that he dwelt among the Canaanites. He became friends with them. And we see that Judah's chief friend was a Canaanite. Now, you and I need to understand that our greatest friends that we should ever have in this world ought to be those who know the Lord, those who are godly people, those who are living for the Lord, those who will encourage us in the Lord, and those that we can encourage in the Lord. The friendships that we make can make or break our Christian life. And that might be something to write down. I don't know. But the friendships that we make can make or break our Christian life. Because you see, we may have the idea that I'm going to be strong in this, and this is what I believe, and this is the life I'm going to live. But if we hang around certain types of people, or if we have our closest friendships with those people, then we'll find that the bad always has its influence on the good. And we'll always see that many times those friendships change who we are, and we end up being similar to our friends. So he finds his best friend among the Canaanites, and I believe he was lifelong friends with this man. Now, what did it lead to? Well, it led to finding a girl among the Canaanites that he wanted to marry. And so her name is not given in this passage, but she is called the daughter of Shua. Shua is a Canaanite there, and he finds this girl who's a daughter of a Canaanite and decides that this is who he wants to be his wife. And we know that Esau did that. We know that Ishmael did that, found their wives of the Canaanites, and then therefore their line was defined by Canaanitish practices and Canaanitish worship and things of that nature. But here we see that he marries this Canaanite. She becomes his wife. And so then they have 3 children as a result of that. So his friendship is the first thing. But secondly, it is his first 2 sons. Notice his first 2 sons. The Bible records to us, for us, the 3 sons that he has, but we're going to notice these first 2. That she conceived and bare a son and called his name and then she had another son by the name of Onan, and then she had a third son by the name of Shelah. But and Onan, we see, were both wicked. We see that for an unknown reason, was wicked in the sight of the Lord. The Bible does not record for us what it was about that was displeasing to God. But God actually smote him. God killed him one day because of the kind of life that he lived. So he died young. But then the brother Onan was not much better. You see, there was a customary practice of the day where if a man married a woman and he died, then his brother was to marry that widow and raise up seed for her brother. In fact, the Bible explains to us later in Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 5 and 6, when this was actually commanded in the law, so not at this time but later on, in the law, in Deuteronomy 25, 5 and 6, the Bible says there that if a man died, then his brother was to marry that man's wife, was to raise up seed to the brother, and that if she were to have a son, then that son would actually be called after the deceased father. So it would actually be in his lineage, not his actual father. So it was to respect the one who died. It was to raise up seed for the one that died. So that was the customary practice even before the law. And so this was what was happening here. That Judah says to Onan, well, why don't you take Tamar, marry her, and then these whatever children you may have, they will be counted as a son of the first husband that died. But Onan didn't have any interest in this, and so he actually took it very lightly. And so we may wonder, well, why did God kill him for what he did? Well, God killed him for what he did because he actually took life very lightly. And I think you and I need to understand when we read a passage like this that God is interested in the life of even an unborn child before that child is even born. And that's a serious thing. And he took the whole thing very lightly. And in fact, by the deed that he committed, he was marring and polluting the godly line. And so God took care of him as well. And so then he has this other son named Shelah. Both the older ones died young. But Shelah's still alive. And so imagine being Judah. Judah lost 2 sons. Okay? 2 sons. And they both had a relationship with the same woman. And so now Judah's thinking, okay, I have a 3rd son. And according to the practice, he would marry Tamar and raise up seed to the brother. Do you remember that story in the Gospels where someone comes to Jesus and they said, there's a woman that had a husband and he died, and then his brother died until 7. Remember that? And she asked him, whose wife shall she be in the resurrection? The Lord says, you do err not knowing the Scriptures and the power of God because there's no marriage in heaven and all that. He explained that. But that was a customary practice. You could have 7 brothers. They would all marry the same woman if they died. They died, and the next one would marry, and so on and so forth. But Judah here he's wanting to delay the process a little bit because he sees that both of them had already died. He thought, well, surely if she marries this last son, he's going to die too, because that's the kind of the pattern going on here. And so he wasn't too excited about doing that. So that's why he decided to basically lie to her and say, okay, well, when my son Shelah's grown, then you can marry him, so why don't you just go back to your father's house and remain a widow for now, and then later on, then you can marry Shelah. But he had no plans, I don't believe. He had any plans of actually doing that. He was just going to delay it and just forget about Tamar, and she would never marry Shelah. And so he wasn't planning that. So here's number 3. We see the fear that Judah had of losing his 3rd son. This is a fear. He was afraid that if she were to marry this one as well, that he would lose all of his sons. So that's his fear. And fear will cause us to do all sorts of things. And then verse 12 says that Judah's wife died. Now remember, it doesn't tell us her name. But the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died. And so he, in process of time, he received comfort, was encouraged, and so on, and went forward with his life. And he specifically was going to go to be with his friend that we learned about earlier, the Adullamite. He was a sheep shearer. That's something he was involved in. And Tamar, by this time, this is in process of time, so time has elapsed. And Tamar here notices that she had not been given to Shelah to be his wife. That was the plan. That was what had been said. And so that's why all these events ensue, these immoral things that happen here. Because Tamar says, well, let me find a way to get even, and let me find a way to trick him. So that's what she did. She tricked Judah. She tricked Judah, as the story explains to us, and played the harlot, and took those widow garments off, because there were certain garments that people would wear to signify certain things. So if you're a widow, you wore different garments than a wife would wear. And so people could tell the difference. And then, of course, the Bible talks about the attire of a harlot. So that's a total different wardrobe. And people would know this is a harlot. So Judah is a widower at this time, right? He had lost his wife. So he's in that place in his life where some estimates say he's still only in his 40s. He could still be not very old. In fact, some think that he could have had a son when he was in his teenage years. So he wasn't necessarily an old man. He could have still been a middle-aged man. And so Judah sees this woman. He thinks, okay, well, he goes into this woman, and then he thinks he can forget about it. And so number 4 is the fornication of Judah and Tamar. The Bible explains to us that he wanted to have relations with her when he saw this woman. And she said, you have to give me something, okay? And I don't have to explain that to you to understand. This is prostitution. It says that you have to give something to me. It's like you're hiring me. So he promises her, and she's very smart. I'm not saying she's wise, I'm just saying she's smart. Because she says, I want a kid of the goats. But then she says, I need a pledge, because you can't give me the kid right now, you got to go get it. And so I need you to give me something right now. Basically to hold the gift so that I know you're going to give it to me. It's kind of like, let's veer off that for a second. Think about a modern day example. How many of you have ever test drove a car before? Ever done that before? What do? They ask you to give them something, right? Like a phone or a credit card or something, I don't know. Maybe not a credit card, but they'll ask you to maybe give them your phone or something while you're out test driving the car, right? So that they make sure you actually come back, okay? So the principle is, she says, okay, if you promise me that you're going to give me what you said you were going to give me, I need you to give me something right now, a pledge to hold that until you bring that to me, because you're going to want to come back for your bracelet and your staff and your signet. And so the pledge here that she wanted was his signet and his bracelet and his staff that was in his hand. Okay, and so he gives that to her, and she ends up expecting a child after this takes place. But he doesn't know. He's ignorant of what has just happened. He doesn't realize that this is Tamar. So she goes out of there. She goes back to her father's house. She takes off her or she puts back on her widow garments. And so he doesn't know what happened. Nobody knows what happens. It's kept undercover. She knew he was going to a certain place, so she strategically sat in a certain place on the way to tempt him. And then she goes back home and thinks basically, Judah thinks at least, that it's over. And he says, okay, well now I've got to give her this kid that I promised. So instead of doing it himself, he sends his friend, his best friend, the Adulamite. And he says, okay, go to this woman over here. She's at such and such place. This is where you're going to find her, and give her this kid. So the Adulamite, I believe his name is Hira here. Hira, the Adulamite, he goes to the place Judah said he would find this woman, and he doesn't find her. She's not there. And so he begins to inquire of the men of the place. He says, where's that harlot that was here? And they all said, what harlot? We don't know what you're talking about. We've never seen it. Never seen a harlot here. No such thing. So he goes back to Judah. The Adulamite goes back to Judah. He says, I look for her. I can't find her. The men of the place say they can't find this woman. And so Judah basically says, because Judah doesn't want to be ashamed and embarrassed about everything, Judah says, okay, just let her have it. Basically, don't worry about the kid. Just let her have the bracelet, let her have the staff, let her have all that. And we won't say anything else about it, because he doesn't want it to come out, right? He doesn't want, hey, I need to find a harlot, I need to figure out where this woman's at. He's not going to want to do that. So he said, okay, let's not worry about it. We'll keep it undercover. But what did we learn last week? Be sure what? Sin will find you out. Be sure it's going to happen. And so he tries to just forget about it. He doesn't want to be discovered. He said, I tried my part. I promised her the kid. We tried to send it. She's nowhere to be found. We'll move on. So then, 3 months later, Judah is given a message. Someone says, hey, did you know that your daughter-in-law, who was in her father's house, she married your 2 sons, and now she's a widow, she's in her father's house. Did you know that she played the harlot? So she was being a prostitute. And she is now expecting a child as a result of that whoredom. And Judah, being the man that he was, and the authority he probably had, he says, bring her forth and let her be burnt. Now, my first question is, should you not be burnt? But that's what he says. And that's just his automatic response. He's probably angry about the whole thing. And he still doesn't know yet that he's the one involved here. And so, without thinking through all that, he says, let her be burnt. So, they're about to burn her. I mean, that was about to happen. Now, in the Old Testament law, which was given later, if I'm not mistaken, if a man and woman were caught in adultery, they're both to be stoned. That was the punishment. They're to be killed, both of them, not just one or the other, or whoever started it or whatever, but they're both to be killed. That was just the punishment to get rid of adultery in Israel and fornication. God said to be killed. So now that's not happening today. We have these kind of things happening everywhere, all the time. But it's very serious to the Lord. The breaking of the covenant is very serious to the Lord. And it is to this day. It's very serious to Him. So they bring her forth, they're going to burn her, but she sends a message. She says, hey, I have a message for my father-in-law, Judah. She says, I have a message for him. She says, look at these things in my hand. The signet, the bracelet, and the staff. And she says, ask my father-in-law, do you recognize these? Because this is the man by whom I'm having a child, this man. So, here's number 5. What's number 5? It's Judah's fault. What is his fault? Well, his fault is, it's a couple things. But his first fault is the fact that he promised something that he would not fulfill. He promised her that he would give her Sheila, that they would be married, but he never fulfilled that promise. The second fault, of course, is coming into a harlot like this, obviously, is that second fault. So it's the infidelity, not he was married at the time, but he wasn't faithful to his word. He was unfaithful to his word. And then committed this immorality is what Judah did. So that's his fault. So Judah looks at him and it dawns on him and realizes what happens. And he said, she hath been more righteous than I. Imagine that. Neither of them were very righteous, I don't think, in this situation. But more righteous than I. Because that I gave her not to Shelah my son. And he knew her again no more. Now, although Judah was involved in this sin, obviously we understand that from both angles, this is sin. We understand that. They're involved in this relationship that wasn't intended to be a marriage, so it wasn't right. But when he discovered who she was, it said he knew her not again. He may have had some repentance. It seems like he did. I personally believe that he did. I think that Judah recognized, it took a lot to recognize it, but I think he recognized what he had done. He didn't know who she was at first. It doesn't excuse the initial action. But I do think he realized what he had done, and he owned up to that. And says, not going to do this again. And so, he recognized his fault, I believe. I don't think that I don't think that Judah was an evil man. I think he sinned. I think he had faults. But remember, Judah was the one who saved his brother's life too. Remember? He saved Joseph's life when they all had the idea that they were going to cast him into a pit and hope that he died. And Judah said, in Genesis 37, verse 26, Judah said, "What profit is it if we slay our brother?" And so he actually suggested that they sell him. Now that's not a good suggestion either, but it's better than killing him. And Judah suggested that. And Judah, now this is interesting to me. And there's a lot of things I don't have the answer for. I don't have the answer for why God uses this person or that person. But Judah was the one through whom Christ would come. It was his line through which Christ would come. That brings us to number 6. So his fault, but then we see, sixthly, his family. So Judah's line would be the line through which Christ would come. So we'll see it come up again in the Scriptures. The Bible says in verse 27 that it came to pass in the time of her travail that, behold, twins were in her womb. So not only is she going to have a child, but she's having twins. And it came to pass when she travailed, and then explains what happens, that one put out his hand, and the midwife took that hand, bound it with a scarlet thread, and that thread was to indicate this is the firstborn. So that's what the scarlet thread was for. This is the firstborn, because he's coming out with his hand, and she thinks, oh, he's first, so she puts that. But then he withdraws the hand. In verse 29, it came to pass as he drew back his hand that, behold, his brother came out, and she said, concerning his brother, how hast thou broken forth? So he sticks out his hand, he brings it back, then his brother comes out. His brother comes out, and she says concerning him, this midwife, how hast thou broken forth? This breach be upon thee. Therefore his name was called Pharez. So in other words, he breached the order. This other guy was supposed to be first. He's supposed to be the firstborn, but he breached that, and he came out. And so the name Pharez means breach. Has the idea of a breaking forth. That's what the name Pharez means. And he bore that name his whole life. The name which meant breach. He made a breach. And then afterward came out his brother, who had the scarlet thread. So Pharez comes out first, then the next kid comes out that has the scarlet thread on his hand. Because he was supposed to be the firstborn, but he actually became the secondborn. And the name Zerah means rising or shining. That's the name they gave him. So notice that Pharez would be the one through whom the line of Christ would come, and therefore the godly line of Judah. If we were to see Matthew 1 verse 3, we would see there that the name Pharez is mentioned in that line of Christ. Matthew 1 is a line that goes all the way back to Abraham, and 14 generations. It lists from Abraham to David, then David to the carrying away of Babylon, and then the carrying away to Babylon to Christ. Remember that, the 14 generations, and it divides those up that way. And Pharez there is mentioned as the son of Judah, and then he gives us that whole line of Judah, and then his son Pharez, and then his son, all the way down to Christ. And then Luke chapter 3, verse 33, we see again the name Pharez that is being mentioned there as being in that line of Christ. So that's why when the blessing comes to Judah, when his father blesses him, he said, there will not be a lawgiver that will cease from your line, because Judah's line became that royal line through which David came. And so that's his line. Now I want us to look at this last verse, passage that I think will be of interest to you. Turn with me to the book of Ruth, if you would. The book of Ruth, which comes after the Pentateuch, and then Joshua, Judges, Ruth. And notice here this line that's mentioned, the line of Judah through Pharez. Ruth chapter 4. Ruth chapter 4. We know the story of Ruth is a wonderful story. The Ruth of Moabitess and Naomi, and how Ruth clave unto Naomi, and she entered the land of Israel, and about the kinsman redeemer, Boaz, a picture of Christ, how he redeemed her and married her, and then raised up seed there. So notice in Ruth chapter 4, look with me, verse 9. Ruth chapter 4, verse 9. Boaz here said unto the elders and unto all the people, ye are witnesses this day, that I have bought all that was Elimelech's, and all that was Chilion's and Mahlon's, of the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, have I purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. You see, Boaz had a different attitude. He said, I'm going to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren, and from the gate of his place. Ye are witnesses this day. And all the people that were in the gate, and the elders said, we are witnesses. The Lord make the woman that is come into thine house like Rachel and like Leah, which two did build the house of Israel. And do thou worthily in Ephratah, and be famous in Bethlehem. And let thy house be like the house of Pharez, whom Tamar bare unto Judah, of the seed which the Lord shall give thee of this young woman. So here when it talks about the house of Pharez, it speaks of the fact that Pharez had numerous descendants. So he was blessed. He was blessed of God. Look down at verse number 17. When Ruth has a son there, Boaz and Ruth come together. Ruth has a son. And there it says in verse number 17, and the women, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying, there is a son born to Naomi. And of course, it's Ruth, but Naomi is her mother-in-law. There is a son born to Naomi, and they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generations of Pharez. It doesn't say Judah, but Pharez. Pharez is the son through whom this line comes. Now these are the generations of Pharez. Pharez begot Hezron, and Hezron begat Ram, and Ram begat Amminadab, and Amminadab begat Nahshon, and Nahshon begat Salmon, and Salmon begat Boaz, and Boaz begat Obed, and Obed begat Jesse, and Jesse begat David. So that's the royal line. God chooses that it would come from the line of Judah, even though it's, Pharez is born out of this relationship. It's a father and a daughter-in-law, not knowing it, but still, she played the harlot that way. And so this becomes the line. This becomes the godly line. This becomes the royal line. This becomes the line through which Christ would come. And and Onan had already died, and so we don't hear much else about Shelah, but Pharez is the one that the line comes through. So I can tell you this, that God uses imperfect people. God uses sinful people. There's no question about that. I think Judah had probably a little bit of a change of his heart. But we're learning from these things. So many things we can learn from it. We have to be careful about our friendships, the influence that has on us. We have to think about staying faithful to the Lord and to His ways. We thank God for every blessing He's given us. And I know that I don't deserve the blessings of God. Have you come to that realization? You don't deserve the blessings of God. Well, Judah, he could say, I don't deserve the blessings of God. But for some reasons we don't maybe understand, we know that God chose this line. And I thank God that He can use anybody. And in fact, it's very interesting to me, if you read the Gospel according to Matthew chapter 1, you'll find that there's a couple of harlots mentioned in the line. Rahab, and then this one here. So it's interesting how God works. And sometimes He works through people who do make mistakes and sin and have faults, right? And some of them have little revelation. You see, Judah didn't have the whole Bible. Some of these people just live in how they felt like living, and they didn't have all the revelation from God. But we do, and we're held to a lot higher standard, and that's a good thing to understand, that we don't have any excuse, because this has been given to us to keep us from these kind of things. And but I thank God that He uses all of us, can use all of us, if our heart is right with the Lord. Even David, we know that he was certainly not a faultless man, but he was a man after God's own heart. And so we're looking forward to getting in the life of Joseph, and the remainder of the book of Genesis will be the life of Joseph. But today we had to learn about Judah. Good things to learn there. May God help us. May God help us.